Okay, we are live on Zoom. So if you haven't yet, follow through on the link in the Twitter, the latest tweet from the Public Land Protocol, and we'll see you guys on Zoom in a minute here. Hey, good morning. I think we have some people coming over from Twitter. Just give them 1 minute to come over here. And we'll get the presentation started. Hey guys, welcome over. So this is getting recorded. I'm going to share the recording of this over YouTube afterwards. And so anyone who wasn't able to make it today will have a chance to get the PLP token, become a contributor. So if you're uncomfortable being on camera during a YouTube video, we'll turn the recording off later for questions and answers and stuff. So yeah, welcome. I think we'll have 1 more minute. It's a really small group. We have time to say hi if you want to while people are filtering in here. No one wants to come up and say hi.
Hey, this is Cloud from Twitter. My name's Curtis Hall. I'm from Dallas, and I've worked a lot in service industry, but I spent a lot of time researching permaculture. I never really got like certification, but I spent like years like just really digesting, learning, studying Bill Mollison and all the other permaculture teachers online, and really like getting a grasp of what it means to live regeneratively, and then having that like drive to like go into places and start doing that. But like sometimes there's a lack of like understanding how regulations work and how like just how the system works, because talking to people in Texas and stuff, I got asked, like I was talking about permaculture with a manager of city manager he wanted to hire me as a it was a regulation like development site regulator or something, but and I kind of want to that's kind of like my direction right now is urban development of like permaculture. I like the idea of being able to like understand like how our impact, like soil sequestration, like building soil in urban areas can like really benefit the health of the population.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for coming here. I feel like we're totally gonna jam today. It's gonna be pretty informal. But yeah, that's awesome. I think that's really cool. So I think I'm gonna go ahead and start, and we'll have the recording of this, so anyone who missed it can come back later. So let me share my screen here. Okay, so this is the Public Land Protocol. And let's see, let me pull up my other screen over here. So first I want to start with a little bit about me. My name is Joe Nisbet, and I'm a landscape architect. I've been doing permaculture design for about 6 years. I got my bachelor's in urban planning at Florida State University and master's in landscape architecture and community planning from Auburn University. And I've gotten the PDC from Jeff Lawton and from a place local to me in Florida, Grow Permaculture. And currently I'm in Jersey City, New Jersey, and I sit on the board of directors for 2 permaculture nonprofits. So I have a grassroots climate activist and community organizing background, and I've been doing regenerative design and landscape-based design and 3D modeling, graphic design for a few years now. So I came into the Web3 space via DeFi. I invested in Bitcoin, years ago. Didn't put in as much as I wanted to, just like everyone else. But now that there's these new tools and technology, I'm really seeing new pathways forward for regenerative design and this passion that I have for building a better planet. So the main thesis that we have is that real world assets are the next frontier for crypto. So real world assets on chain are going to enable new possibilities with DAOs and all these other dApps. Once you bring it on chain, because of the network effect, because of the composability, it's going to be, we aren't even able to imagine what's going to happen next. But it's really going to be bringing the real world on chain that's going to blow all of this up. And the second part of that is that it's specific to climate projects that we're going to be able to make a huge impact. I think if we just bring the traditional financial markets, traditional real estate, and put it all on chain, I think that'd be a huge mistake. I think we have a lot of ways to collaborate and build synergy around the people who want to make a difference and building the regenerative economic system that we need to using crypto. So there's new possibilities. We don't have to recreate the old system on crypto. So the mission and purpose of the public land protocol is breaking down by the 3 words. Public, it's a community-driven climate impact and planetary regeneration open source Web3 tools. So basically, like I was saying on the Twitter space, we're launching before we have a product market fit. This is based off an idea, a theory, and different ways that we can come together as a community to explore this. So the Public Land Protocol is building a library of different tools for land stewards and people who are interested in these different topics to come together to build and design and to work together collaboratively. So the Public Land Protocol is a community, it's a DAO community of designers, developers, and land stewards, creating a library of tools. So the different themes that we're interested to explore, and some of these we've gone down a little bit more than others, but in general, DAOs, the future of work, the ability to own, the networks that you participate in, it's a different relationship than being a consumer in Web 2. And then the direct democracy that's enabled through fully transparent, fully community controlled token communities. And like I was saying in the beginning, real world assets, bringing those on chain. Land trust law is something that we're really passionate about. How can DAOs that last, longer than perhaps a country or some other business might last, how can they have a regenerative impact on the ground in a lasting way? And then my background in permaculture design, I think that's the method for how we create these spaces on the ground, how we design ecosystems and human systems that work beneficially together. And then I'm really interested in not only, like a carbon project in the middle of the woods that no one can visit, but like, how do people come together in the space? What does an inclusive community look like? What does it look like to engage the people with the education about all of this? And so I think that's an interesting, the public realm. And then DeFi, the different tools that we can use with that, and refi, there are a lot of things that we can do with new carbon credits and other biodiversity credits and other types of things. Once we have a land steward, we can help them find these different tools. So one of the first things that we started doing is we're participating in the Sovereign Nature Initiative hackathon. And so one tool that we've been spending about a month on building is Orgo. So this is an app for landscape stewardship. So the Public Land Protocol is a library of tools. This is just one that we've been working on. Basically, it's the idea that we can gamify what needs to happen on the ground to maintain the landscape, to build a regenerative system. So you can earn experience points and governance tokens and rewards for completing maintenance tasks on the ground, vote on proposals to build the eco-village, and purchase and collect NFTs representing tasks that you were a part of that got completed. So you can even do like retroactive public goods funding. It's kind of like the Pokemon Go for regenerative stewardship. So you can run around and find, oh, these, we need to do some weeding. Here's, 5 governance tokens that I can collect if I do this task. So we've had a lot of fun building this, and we're going to present this at the hackathon this weekend. And then one other thing that we've spent a little bit of time working on is the idea of tokenizing stewardship. This is the public land abundance token, still a work in progress. Everything's a work in progress. But really the idea of moving beyond carbon credits, how can we create a credit, a tokenized, commoditized DeFi token for regenerative stewardship as a whole? So we have the holistic ecosystem and community health rated by the biocompatible design standards that's developed by the Institute for Integrated Regenerative Design. So it's a set of 21 different principles across 3 categories that we can grade a land project for how efficient and optimized it is for the water cycle, the nutrient cycle, for biodiversity and habitat, for inclusive, equitable communities and social justice, all sorts of factors of holistic health, going way beyond carbon. And it seems like we'll be able to do this using the basket of eco credits on the region network, but it's a work in progress. So the idea is you would have an individual property owner that they could come in, we would help them tokenize their property, bring their assets on chain, develop a community treasury. So it's a community owned piece of land. It could be a very diverse types of properties could be considered: conservancies, private homesteading land, farms, public parks, recreative trails, and just like undeveloped raw land, problem areas land. And then basically we will use the rating system to assign the plat token to each land steward. And so that new token that we create will go straight to land stewards directly with no middleman, so that they can benefit from the work that they're doing to create holistic, whole, healthy ecosystems and communities. And then other potential outputs that I think are possible that we want to work on is just building the community itself, finding the types of events, jobs, and creating content around these theories, these ideas, this community, this way of looking at regenerative finance. The public land protocol treasury, as we build different tools and find grant money, hackathon prize money, angel investors, as we grow money that we have, we will be able to come together as a community to invest in different, make an impact where we like. We want to open source everything that we're doing. One thing we are exploring is hiring a lawyer to make sure we can have these SEC exempt governance tokens of real world assets. And we're in a really specific place that like some of the other people that are doing like traditional real estate, like Proppy or Centrifuge or Materium, these other different people, you have a lot of trouble with the SEC because that governance token represents the equity of the land. But in our case, the people who are directing control of the land are all on board with not even owning the land, that this land is going to exist forever in perpetuity. So we feel confident that we can, get around some of that and offer something to the DeFi community. And then there's some other things here. I mean, one thing we looked into is getting a pro vault from the CHIDAO, having 0 interest loans for land stewards. So basically a loan that they don't need to have a payment schedule to pay back, really flexible to develop a climate project or other impact project. You can have a longer time frame vision of how you're going to get the yield from what you're doing. Some of these projects can take 5-10 years to really get off the ground. And then the marketplace. So once we're bringing these communities onto helping to tokenize their land, helping to build DAOs out of them, we want to help to create the marketplace where they can buy and sell these other different governance tokens. So like a draft idea for the roadmap, some next steps moving forward. as I said, we're starting first with the community. So before we have a product, before we have everything figured out, we're starting with you guys, building these relationships, building the DAO, building in public, sharing what we're doing, and it's flexible and it might change. So that's number one. And right now we're at number two, which is launching the proto token. So by the end of the month, we will have a token, and I'm going to share a little bit more on the next slide. But going forward, we're going to continue to raise funds through grants. There's multiple grants that we're looking at right now, and hackathon prizes, angel investors, and NFT launch. We're talking with an artist about what that might look like for us. Purchasing our first protocol owned property. We really like to have a demonstration of what we're doing. I think that'll really signal to the rest of Twitter and Refi that, we are working on something. And then investing in the ecosystem and growth. So that library of tools, developing out the Orgo app to a more refined place, getting it fully functional. And we're talking about trying to start it in New York, probably first. That's where I'm based. That's where Jolly's based, who's been active since the beginning. And then the last thing is just onboarding continue to onboard the land stewards and growing this marketplace of these different tools and how they work together. So on to the token. So basically, we are launching a proto token. We are going to go live with the token before the end of the month. It's called Contributor Reward Public Land Protocol Governance Token. So it's CRPLP, purple. It's the purple PLP. So you can only earn this through being a contributor at the DAO. And I am starting at 0. So there's no one that owns any of this today. People who sign up to be a contributor, we're all going to share in the rewards of this. So over time, the number of hours you work in a week, by the end of the month, we're going to distribute the purple governance token to those contributors. And then eventually it's going to be redeemable for the true PLP governance token, which may or may not, it's yet to be seen how we're going to design and develop that. But the main thing is that you have a share of the future earnings potential of the public land protocol. So the different grant money and angel investor money that we're working on raising, the contributors, it's a worker-owned DAO. So the people who are helping to build this space are going to share in that yield. And it's a governance token, so voting and control. So this is the link to apply to be a contributor. There's also, if you don't know that you have time to be a contributor, we have options for like 5 hours a week, 10 hours a week, 20 hours a week. It's very flexible, and it's still really informal. We're still working out how exactly all of this stuff works. So we're excited to do it with you. But if you don't know about being a contributor, just sign up for the email updates and you'll know when there's like a public token launch that you can purchase. So it's publiclandprotocol.com. It's just our landing page for that. And then lastly, I just wanted to share some upcoming things on our calendar. This weekend, we're participating at the Sovereign Nature Initiative Hackathon. We're going to present the Orgo app, and we're hoping to win some money. And we will share the results of that on Twitter and YouTube and stuff like that. And then next Tuesday, 6:30 p.m. Eastern, these are all Eastern time, Alan Booker from the Institute of Integrated Regenerative Design will come to speak about biocompatible design system and the rating system for holistic ecosystem and community health. And then we're going to continue these calls. These are going to be public weekly community calls. This week is all about an introduction and launching the DAO, who we are, what we're all about. And then going forward, we'll just continue to have updates and telling the public about what we're doing. And we'll have the private working groups, people in the DAO. Once you apply, we'll reach out to you and get you set up, and we'll work together throughout the week. So that's the public community call, probably next Thursday. And we might change the time depending on when people are available and stuff. So I'm going to stop sharing there. And are there any questions that anyone has? Is anyone, what are you guys' thoughts? I'm curious to hear what you guys are thinking.
excited to see, where this goes. I work with Joe closely with the SNI Hackathon, and we're gonna take Orgo to presentation this weekend. So I'm excited. And yeah, I would love to just, keep working with you on this. And I think you had sent a link earlier on, what areas people are more comfortable with or they have experience in. So maybe if we want to post that on the Zoom later too, just if you want to, quickly thought. So one form application on, what are your strengths and how many hours you think you can contribute. But yeah, and just a little bit about me. My name is Jolly. I used to be a corporate banker for many years, and then I quit recently last year, wanting to focus on environmental sustainability. So this was, I think my goal was to find something where, you can create environmental sustainability and help the world, but still be incentivized to do it. And I feel like this is the perfect middle ground that does achieve both. So yeah, I'm very new to public web protocol and the world of DAOs. So this is very exciting.
Hi, so thanks for that. I came in late, so I haven't really followed a lot, but I'm curious to know more. I'll spend some time in the DAO. I'm part of Discord. I'm part of the Discord group. But yeah, this is something interesting. So I've been contributing at Climate DAO, spending some time in Eden DAO. Just to share, I'm also working part time or contributing at Loa Labs. So they are associated with the region. So yeah, I mean, I'm curious to see where this goes. Absolutely, I love it. Yes.
Joe, you said I think you mentioned something about something with regen. So you said that was a work in progress. I'm interested in what kind of your ideas on that, like initiative. And I like the idea of the marketplaces. I just tweeted out something about marketplaces actually not long, like today, about marketplaces that are being created now are just like really like all about making money and putting up whatever is on there. And like that is like perfect. You like kind of hit that point where it was like, marketplaces are specifically on your chain for purpose. There's a purpose for it. It's not like anyone can come in there and make an NFT about for whatever. And so that's what kind of like that concept I'm trying to share with as many people as possible, because it's important to know what that is. And yeah, so I'm really, really big into like networking around. I have some connections made in Cosmos right now. I'm actually trying to work with the Omniflix network in like a kind of like design, interface design stuff, and trying to facilitate like developers and artists to kind of come together and work on more, design stuff, and then being able to like have a community of developers, that stuff like that. So a lot of that's a work in progress. I do try to tackle a lot, but I'm really grateful to be in this space, because actually this really aligns with something that I'm really passionate about, and that's design and in nature. And like how living in Dallas, you can literally see like when my parents lived here, like north of Dallas, like in the Plano area, was like all grass, all like just a country road. And now it's like a giant city, like all these buildings and cities, and the housing developments is just all like, like just slabbed on there. It's like so like my fear was always like, is this gonna keep happening the same way? And so I really want to like, I'm really excited to be a part of this, because I feel like that's something that I could actually use for Texas. And some people that I know that are working in permaculture, they teach permaculture. And yeah, yeah, I'm really excited to be a part of this community.
Yeah, I'm so excited you're here. I think we're just trying to find all the same people on the same vibe, and like, let's work together, let's build together, let's vibe. So the thing about the region network is I've been watching, like, I think that they're going to be like the best place to launch custom eco credits. And I think the public land abundance token, trying to tokenize holistic ecosystem and community health, and then distribute it directly to the stewards. So I think regions like are perfectly aligned with that. I'm following what they're doing now with practice-based credits, with environmental stewardship credits. So I think the one thing I saw that was missing from that, from our perspective, would be the community health, like the people side of things. And that's definitely a huge part of what I'm really passionate and interested in. As a landscape architect, we design for people. So making the landscape something accessible, legible, inclusive, something that people can enter in and learn something about, can participate in and interact with. So I think we can, continue to form these different partnerships. We're still trying to figure out what other people are even building. So there's going to be a lot of effort to kind of iterate that product market fit. So the public land protocol, we're just collecting these people together to vibe, create, build, designers, developers, and land stewards. That's the three groups. So we want to build what is needed by the community, what can we provide to the community, what's existing, and then it's open source. So forking stuff, making stuff that's forkable. So yeah, I think the region network stuff, it's a work in progress, and I'm still trying to understand everything that's already built, because they have such a massive thing going. They're connected very well to everyone else in the space. So yeah, that was the region network thing. I'm glad we have someone from Loa Labs here. I think you guys are going to be a great partnership, and that's what this is all about. So networking, partnering. I don't personally have an ego tied to this group has to do something this way, or that this product has to be this way. Let's just figure it out together. What needs to be done, and let's form the community. I think one other thing, and it ties into on the ground, what does it feel like to enter into this space? What is the community human aspect of it? But also in Web3, what does this community human aspect look like? Can we continue to build? Can we make it easier and easier for people to join the Discord and jump in? And easier for people to feel comfortable where they're at. If they're on Facebook, let's meet them on Facebook. I think lots of things that I've seen are still such a high barrier to enter. It's still so complex. And even for me, trying to understand all this stuff, it's difficult to even get going. And I think, like over 90% of the people in the Discord are just lurkers. So people are really curious. We just got to tap into that. So I'm interested in how public land protocol can help to form those communities, make it easier for people, and share what these partners are doing, making it more and more accessible. The people on the ground, how easy is it for them, stuff like that. So yeah, so glad you guys.
I love that. I just want to pick up on that, and I think that really sets the stage for exploring various use cases, because I think what you're saying, when region is doing things, and they are definitely working on publicizing the use cases, and they have something called endowments that's coming out. So their region foundation is that aspect, which is working around the community. And I think what you're doing out here, and I, again, forgive me for not having studied this before I attended the call, but I think the opportunity to create use cases for people to really visualize how the protocol or the token or this organization or this collective of people who are concerned or who are passionate about this can really do different things in different use cases. I think that just giving people and I'm going to pick up on the part where you said a lot of people are lurkers, especially because people don't really immediately get the use case. They don't identify with, okay, how can I do this, or can I do this, or who's doing this. So the moment we start, just pulling that up, pushing that out into the community in terms of, okay, this is one example where we would come in and this is what we would do given this, or we could do, that might just pull in people and get them to come in with ideas about how they could be part of this Lego, as we call it, right? In terms of building this whole thing together. Yeah.
Any other questions about the technical, aspects of the proto token? We're really excited to have new contributors joining. I was saying earlier, we have like 5-hour, 10-hour, 20-hour. We could even do more if someone wanted to go full time with this. But yeah, I'm really excited for that aspect of things, building that up and
So
forming
I
a,
had a question around that.
yeah.
So when you're talking about, the contributing, are you going to be running these contributions as seasons? Because it might be difficult for somebody to commit to long term being a contributor. So if there are seasons, for example, where you would tell me, what, Pranav, you can come in and contribute for season 1, which is going to be running for like 6 weeks, and in these 1.5 months, this is what we would be doing, and this is, you can contribute in these areas. Where could you add value, and what is the time you could give? That might be easier for me personally to make a decision on that. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So right now, what I'm planning to do is just everyone who's interested contributing to come, and we'll continue to reach out to them and work out on a team because we're building this together. But I'm wanting to fork the Haifa dough, and they've done a lot of amazing work, definitely working with seasons. I think in the beginning, we should have seasons probably no longer than a month so we can continue to iterate and see how things are going. And I do know in particular, I think on the developer side, we could use help with the current things that we have going on. So the Orgo app, depending on what we get out of the Sovereign Nature Initiative, we're hoping to win about 7 or 8 grand at the hackathon. If we want in the top 3, and we feel good, like we've been working on this a lot. So hoping, we could win some money there. I know one specific area that we could use, we currently have a clear idea of what we need as developers looking at what we've produced and the technical requirements for those things. But we're creating a library of different tools. So yeah, it's totally a work in progress. I would say season 1 would be the next month. By the end of February, we will have begun the distribution of the proto token, and then we'll sign up for another month, another season in March. And we have to keep iterating to make sure we're hitting, we're staying on track with our mission and the community, what we need to be doing.
And I did go ahead and post a link in our Zoom chat. So if you want to fill out, just role specific experience and what you may have more experience in.
So does anyone want to share, do you want to share more about what you guys are already working on? Are you guys in other crypto projects or land-based projects that might be related you want to tell us about?
Yeah, I mean, so the other day I had so for the resonance community is kind of like, the vibe. I call it like, so in OmniFlix, I'm trying to establish the vibe 3. I don't know. I feel like that's a good place to establish like maybe like a node on their network for the vibe 3. I know you said vibe was really, really cool. So, but I was making a call on Twitter, and I've been actually really, really trying to push this project called Endangered Tokens. He's got it. He has a really, really big foundational, like, I guess, understanding of how he wants to tokenize the endangered trees. He's got 6 endangered trees in Chile right now, and these NFTs are like only for green listed investors, and then they're pretty high investment, and so it's like, this NFT is like this you know, this node of, or a stake in some sort of way that we could, you know, utilize the public land protocol, because it's not just the tree itself, it's like the actual land that is around the tree and all the trees that are, how many trees are in there, and stuff like that. Because I'm going to give a little backstory on that, because I feel like it is something in my heart to share. About, like, you know, so I met this guy online from Chile, Max Morales. He was explaining how a lot of the people are being pushed out of the jungles that they, you know, they're natively from there with the trees and everything. And he was saying, like, you know, he wants to push, uh you know, he wants to get people back into the jungles and stuff. And, you know, having, I feel like that is a use case for public land protocol, and in that sense too. um and yeah, like, so, and then I was trying to connect them, but Max Morales is like really, really like a tight guy. Like, he wants your LinkedIn, he wants to get to know you, and he wants to, like, you know, and he's working with lots of angel investors, and I'm like trying to like connect the dots here and help. But, you know, we all have a certain role here, and yeah, so I'm right now, I'm kind of like, you know, last year, there's a lot of ideas I had. You know, I was really searching for a calling. My calling was calling me, and I was stuck in Dallas doing some um landscaping work for my friends. And it was just like really like a cycle of, like, you know, oh, we're gonna go and have fun, and we're hanging out, doing our fun thing, and while we're working and stuff. And, you know, it wasn't like as satisfying and gratifying. I felt like there was something better for me. So I moved out. I had to, you know, get out of that area and move to Paris, Texas, where I live now. And they have a farmers market here, which is really good example of, like, you know, how we could product layer certain things, as like a representation of that. And I'm trying to work with some of the people there, that are kind of involved in that. They have experience in, you know, how farmer economics work, you know. And um but yeah, so, you know, this is for me, you know, resonation vibes, all the way. And I come, you know, I just I've been involved in some communities online. You know, I don't know if anyone's familiar with paradigm shift. I mean, I'm throwing a curveball kind of here, but I mean, I could talk to some of y'all later, you know, Joe, about some of the stuff. I can share links on Twitter. You know, I'm all about like being on Twitter, and the stuff I post on Twitter is not always like, you know, super like informative, but I really feel like there's something to some of the stuff I post. You know, it's not just a meme. You know, memes aren't just memes. Um, I can, you know, I believe that there's a big, deeper message behind some of the stuff that, you know, come through visual art and stuff like that. So, um, and I mean, I could just talk all day about the idea I was proposing to endangered tokens, about like establishing these low impact, like, it's kind of like a low impact vacation place or observatory kind of deal. And it kind of works around the public land protocol, in a sense of like how, you know, people want to go out and explore nature, and they want to and go and do their art, look at nature, paint paintings, do all this stuff, you know, make these NFTs, for example. But there's got to be a way that's like really eco-friendly, and really like that's aligned with nature. And that's the beautiful part about like um permaculture. And people, a lot of people don't think about in permaculture, because if you're, you know, you're from New York, which is in it like an urban jungle per se. It's not like you're, you know, you're a land steward in Texas or somewhere where there's a lot of land. There's a different kind of permaculture there. Like, you know, in India they have the, you know, they have the ability to food forest. Swales are a lot more, you know, um usable, I guess. I mean, they add up quickly, you know. It's kind of like, you know, if you look at this tropical jungle, and you can like take that as an urban jungle, but like in the in the Web3 version, you know, like the New York is kind of like a Web3 version of like a jungle, you know, and that's kind of like the concept of these low impact places, because at that point, like people from these urban environments can like meet up into these like, you know, places that are being like, you know, public land, you know, they are being taken care of, you know. I love your concept of it's going to be here for the rest of our lives, and you know that's something that we need to consider. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of information and a lot of connections I'm making right now. And I mean, I just thank God for giving me the chance to like help as much as I can, and I really I'm super grateful for a lot right now. My bad if that was a lot.
For being here for now. Yeah, that's awesome. Thanks for being here. I think, yeah, like something that you said, for me, it's like the swales in New York. There's no swales in New York. That's probably not going to happen. It's all about ecologically appropriate, culturally appropriate regenerative practices. How can, you know, I live in an apartment. It's super difficult. I don't have space to plant trees. So all of the benefits that the tree system can provide, just not possible in an apartment. You know, I have my potted plants and stuff, and I do like minor amounts of composting and stuff, but it's a lot of like social permaculture and these open sort of public community garden type spaces where you can share 100 people in 100 apartments can share an outdoor space together because it's so limited here. Um, so yeah, I'm excited for like the first protocol owned land. Just imagine what we could do. We could come together and design something amazing. You know, I'm based out of New York. I think that being on the ground with people who are, you know, high up, contributing a lot in the DAO, like having land close to each of those like nodes in the DAO. So I think, you know, if you get protocol known in Texas, then you, Curtis, and, you know, whoever else you want to round up can help, you know, use and apply these tools to that property. But I'm totally on the same page with ecotourism. There's such cool things you can do where the people visiting really appreciate the space that you've created, regenerative permaculture design, and they have a limited impact on the land versus some other types of land use cases, you know, where the more that you accelerate, you know, the consumption or the like use, that economic transfer, then like the more you destroy the environment. Even regenerative ag, there's like a limit almost to, you know, what you can do with a certain size property, you know, and then that's when you get bump up against that limit is when people do less regenerative practices to try to increase that, you know, and end up extracting from the land and stuff. But I think with ecotourism, that's specifically a use case that we could develop tools towards, where people could develop a property, put it on Airbnb, you know, run it by, you know, the DAO maintains it, and, you know, whatever, and then the money goes back to the DAO, stuff like that. So tons of cool things that we can do. It's still really open and vague, but I think that's good because we need to find the things that resonate with people.
Yeah, dude, what just came to my mind about the ecotourism thing is like, and something that really hits home is native like ownership, like people that are from the countries and they know the land and they're from there. You know, they have a biological connection with it. Those people are the ones who need to be like running the nodes. You know, it's, I mean, yes, you know, it's good to support them, but the ones like physically on the ground, or, you know, it doesn't have to be like that. I mean, but I'm saying like, you know, I guess there's certain conditions that would be acceptable, but as you know, there's the vetting process, I'm sure that would be going on, and I'm sure that you're you know, from what your experience is, the standards there, and you know, all the other we have the beautiful thing about Web3 is that we have the community and the support. it's just, you know, not in the Discord sometimes. It's not inside of the space in general, because I mean that's the beautiful part about blockchain, you know, and the way that we can communicate and stuff. And Regen has you know, in the Cosmos blockchain, with all the inner blockchain communications, and a very good easily transferable of information, you know. But yeah, I would love to keep talking on more ideas. And Joe, I would, you know, I can't wait to like talk to you, share more links and data, and maybe like, you know, more participation in Refi DAO and trying to gather some more people up, you know, on this initiative.
Cool. Yeah, thanks. Drop some comments in the Discord. We'll get together and apply on publiclandprotocol.com and we'll set up a meeting soon. Cool. All right. I think we can end it there. Thanks everyone for coming. See you guys later.
Joe, yeah.